Welcome to Secura Law Experience. I'm Luis Elizalde, founder of Secura Law. I'm here with
Eduardo Beauregard.
Okay, we have a new episode today. As I said episode before, I want to update the closing process. So we're gonna talk about again of the closing process, the steps to have a really smooth closing. We already have some episodes about that, but it's always good to have an update. And if something you don't understand in the other episode, you can see only this one. So please enjoy, and we're gonna explain the closing process. Ed, if you want to.
Sure. As we spoke previously, the closing process in our office basically is 5 steps that we're going to walk with the clients hand to hand, obviously. Our first step would be always the part of the due diligence, because this is the most pivotal step in our expertise.
But sorry to interrupt. But in what moment of the process we started due diligence? Because the client, okay, they arrive, they buy, or they like a property, they do an offer, they sign that offer, and in that moment, with that offer, and they made the earnest money deposit, the seller, of course, send us all the documents, and we start the due diligence. The due diligence.
Right. That is a little previous to what the first step actually goes in. However, there's cases where we start from the very beginning, where the client is still looking for properties.
Sure.
And sometimes we get in when they already have a signed offer, right?
Yeah.
Could be both ways. In my experience, the sooner the better. If we can step in since really the beginning, where you're knowing your broker and you're starting to look at the properties around, we can give you like the proper guidance to look for certain bullet points on every development or property before you even send an earnest money or start thinking of an offer, right?
Exactly.
However, once that step is done, you've chosen your property and you are signing an offer and sending the deposit money, that's when the developer or owner releases all the legal documentation of such property so we can put our hands on it, right? The main part here is to look into the public registry for all the public records of that property to know for sure if there's any lien, any encumbrance, any notation, any trial with the property that we may not know about.
Sorry again. Do you think could be a good idea if we establish like here the image of what is the closing process?
Sure, I think it'll be good. I will talk about it like step by step, like the 5.
Yeah, exactly.
So I can look at it here. But the process is basically the due diligence first, then the promissory contract. Third is the fideicomiso, or AKA trust. Then the signing of the public deed. And finally, we go back to the public registry. That's why it's a circle. We start and finish at the same place.
Perfect.
Right?
Yeah, sorry to interrupt.
No problem. So now that we have the documents and we go to the public registry, now we can give you like a proper legal guidance and advice on how to proceed with the transaction. Because here we're going to look at the owner's title, we're going to look at the public records, and we are for sure know what the steps are going to be. It's going to be the same steps that I mentioned. However, how we approach them is the important part. And that's what makes a transaction successful.
Yeah.
Because we cannot walk blindly into every transaction with the same plan. Here we're working on the game strategy, basically. So
and every transaction looks the same, you know? It's like, okay, it's a real estate transaction, and the process and the steps has to be the same. No, but the thing that you're saying, of course, is very different from one transaction to another, because the people, The
Yeah.
people that are involved, the notary publics, the cost, everything is
The
different.
HOA,
The HOA,
who knows?
everything is different. So that's the reason to make a really good due diligence is which we are gonna tell the client, hey, this property is perfect. You can move forward to the next step. Hey, no, sorry, this is property doesn't look good, but has a solution. Okay, let's move forward with the promissory contract. Or totally, the worst case scenario could be, no, this property is not good for you because of this, you know? And in that moment, look for another property. It's kind of simple, but very important.
If the client doesn't want to listen to our advice, well, it's in their hands, basically, right?
Yeah.
However, we know what's going to happen.
Exactly.
So we will accompany you either way, but with a warning, right? Like it's not that we didn't do our job. It's just we know what's going to happen. We told you, but you definitely want to keep moving forward because you love that property and you want to have it no matter what, right?
Normally it's about money, you know? Normally it's when, hey, there is, I don't know, a debt or property tax of 3 years, and the client say, okay, I'm gonna pay it, you know, because the seller doesn't want to pay it, something like that. Or something that we are gonna say never go there. It's where it's a lien in the property.
Or it's already at the courthouse.
Exactly, with a courthouse. That's a real problem. So as soon as we saw that it's very hard, it's very unusual, but if we saw that, in that moment we'll tell you, no way to move forward. And if you're gonna move forward, I think it's the worst that you can do. But that's in due diligence.
Just as a couple of examples, when we look at this, we will for sure know if you are going to be best off if you choose an assignment of rights or if we make an extinction of trust and create a new one because of the different banks, the different timing, because it all depends on if you can come down here, if you can grant a power of attorney, if you want to schedule the closing for a certain month of the year. So all that, we have to mix it up and come with the best solution to fit your needs, right? So as an example, let's say that we looked at the property and we know that it belongs to a foreigner that already has a trust. However, that trust is 30 years old, right?
Yeah.
And it's with a very old bank. I think, and that 30 years ago, I think BBVA was the best one, right?
Yeah.
So as of today, that bank is not really that good because actually it's very expensive.
That's the thing. It's expensive. It's not that it's not good. The thing is that it's a bank with a lot of years, a lot of bureaucracy. And that makes everything really complicated for a smooth closing. I'm not saying that it's
impossible, right?
Impossible, but it's hard to work. So after you try to send all the documents and everything, a lot of bureaucracy. That's the reason everybody is considering that BBA
should be an extension.
Yeah, exactly.
Basically.
Yeah, totally.
Aside, because I think 30 years ago the trusts used to last 35.
No, sorry, but it was. Oh my God, I'm old. Has to be from the 1980s and 1990s. Normally the trust was. The trust were 30 years, and after 96, 97, I think they start 50 years. I'm not sure with the dates, but something like that.
So in this scenario, obviously, we'll have to look at that because most likely that trust is about to expire. So it doesn't make any sense for you as a new owner to get the assignment of rights of such trust because it's pretty much done. So in that case, we would suggest you, hey, let's make this extension of this trust and create a brand new one for you. We will go deeper into the trust process at the third step, but that is basically the due diligence, right? We make a radiography of all the transaction so we can give you the proper guidance and legal advice.
And with that due diligence, we can move forward to the second step, that is the promissory contract. Because as soon as we have all the information, with that information, we can establish a correct details in the promissory contract. As you said, the HOA. The HOA maybe normally is established in the promissory contract like, okay, as soon as you receive the property and you sign the title, you are going to pay the HOA. That's the normal. But what happened is there are extraordinary fees. And no one told you about that. With the due diligence, we know that. And in the promissory contract, we are going to establish, okay, HOA normal.
Certain obligations for the parties.
Exactly. We changed that little details make the difference. So
yeah, and sometimes depending on the rush, we sometimes work on the due diligence and start reviewing the contract at the same time.
Yes.
Because sometimes we have clients that are here for just a couple of days. They saw the property and they want to leave with the contract already signed, right? So in those cases, we work at the same time. We go to the public registry while we review the promissory contract to see any hidden clauses that might be a problem in the future, right? And our job is to, in the second step, that is the promissory contract, review everything, amend everything, and negotiate everything that needs to be negotiated for a level playing field for both parties.
What do you think is the most important in the promissory contract to review? The main points that we have to review,
For
the main
me,
items?
there are several.
Yeah, but try to keep it simple. Of course, not like an attorney
Of course,
view.
yeah. First of all, that the people that appear in the contract have to
Good.
be registered in the public registry.
Yes.
Because sometimes we end up with frauds where people sign promissory contracts to their names and they're not even the owners, right?
Yeah.
So first thing that. Second, we have to have the proper description of the property as it is in the public registry to know that we're referring to that specific property. We don't
Good.
want to be looking at a house and then the description legally is the one next door. And then when you sign your title, you're actually buying the one next door and not the one you wanted, right?
Yeah.
So that is also very important. From there, it's just a matter of actually checking the price, that is correct. The payment schedule, how it's going to be, that it's reflected the way it should. And most important, it's either with a developer or a resale. It's very important that we establish the closing date and who is going to pay for what. Because in this contract, which may have a very similar structure as the offer, because we're basically drafting the offer obligations and requesting the contract to be official. However, in the contract, we have to be a little bit more specific on penalties, obligations, and all that. So there we choose who's going to pay for what, their expenses, what is going to be the penalty, and what are the exit mechanisms for that contract, right?
Now, at the end, the name is, if you saw it like that, the name is the difference. Something is a contract in which you bind both parties to fulfill that contract, and the other is an offer, just an offer. I'm not saying that it's not valid, but it's...
That's a very common question.
Yeah, exactly. But it's an offer. At the end, it's something that the name say it as is, it's...
And it says there, usually, when you're working with a broker, you take a very quick glance of the offer, and usually at the very bottom, with the very small letters, you are going to see that offer usually is 15 days
has to
valid.
be 15
right?
days valid with reimburse 100% reimburse of the depositor net money.
If it's not like that, that's
Then,
red flag.
a little red flag. Okay, so we have due diligence, we have already promissory contract with penalties, all the little details, and then we can move forward to the third step, that is...
That it should be the fideicomiso or trust. Okay. This one is very interesting because there's a lot of bullet points to talk about. So maybe
let's try to keep it simple.
Simple
in this episode.
In this episode, the main thing for the foreigner to understand is that the property, since it's in a prohibited zone area by the government and the constitution and the foreign investment law in Mexico, they have to go through this process of the trust, which is a Mexican bank holding the property to their names, right?
So they are not owners.
On paper, no, but legally, yes. That means that
No, I think it's the other side, right?
it's an extra step, basically, because they are going to use the bank to hold it for them. It's not directly to them.
But they see on paper, they will see their names.
Yes, in the deed, you see their names.
Because they are the beneficiaries of that
such
trust or fideicomiso. And because of that, they can use the property wherever they want. You know, if they want to rent it, if they want to sell it, if they want to do whatever with that property, they can do it. So they are like the owners through the bank, and that's it, you know. And at the end, they will see everything in one document. That's also really good because normally the trust that you know in US or Canada, you have one trust with the bank and then your title. No, here in Mexico, you have your title in one document, the trust contract or fideicomiso contract, and the title is gonna be in one document. It's gonna be huge document, but it's one that is gonna be the complete title. You're gonna see the name of the seller, name of the bank, the trustee bank, and your name. So,
that's a fair point. For you to understand it, the third step and the fourth are actually one. The third step is a pre-step, because we have to start working on everything, because at the fourth step, which is the public deed, that's when everything clashes and comes together into one title.
I think the third step could be more specific to the permit of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Actually,
and with a new trust. When it's an assignment, okay, we can talk with the bank, with the clients, buyer, seller, to get together all the documents and to review that everything is okay, as you said. But I think it's most important the third step in a new trust for the permit.
Yeah,
most in specific the permit of Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
That said, we have to walk you through what that is. Basically, since you wish to own property in the prohibited zone, the government needs to grant a permission to you. This permission is not that they'll say, no, you can't do it. It's just a filing of a document at the Ministry of the Foreign Affairs.
At the end, it's a process.
It's a process. And with this process, you are very well protected because this acts like a will. In this permit, will establish who's going to be the settler, which is the owner that's going to put the property into the trust, and that's it. They no longer have properties or rights over that. We have the trustee bank, that's going to be the bank that's going to help you with the administration and holding of the trust. And then your name as beneficiaries, that means that you are the legal owners of that trust. Once that is set, you can appoint your substitute beneficiaries in that permit. That means that whatever happens to you, you already have somebody to leave that trust to. Yeah. Good thing there is that you can appoint as many people as you want, and you can appoint them in different percentages as you wish. Another good point is that at any point that you have your trust, you can change this with just a simple letter to the bank. If you want to adjust, if you want to put more people in, if you want to take people out, you can do it freely.
Yeah, totally.
Right?
Perfect.
What else could be talked about? The trust is good for 50 years nowadays. Now that we're talking about that, renewable for another 50. So 100 years total. You have one of your obligations here is that you have to pay an annual fee every year.
Before that, sorry. The payment. Why is the third step is not the second? Meanwhile, they can do it, or they can sign the promissory contract. They can pay the trust in that moment. We don't recommend that. Why? Because if something happened during the process to sign the promissory contract, and you don't sign the promissory contract, and you already paid to the bank, to get that money back is going to be really, really hard. At the end, they are banks. They have bureaucracy, process. I'm not saying that you're not going to get it back, but it's going to be really, really hard. So that's the reason we establish as the third step, or after the promissory contract, the payment to the trust or fideicomiso. because in that moment we have the certainty that this closing is gonna happen because there is a contract already signed by seller and buyer. So sorry about you were talking about the annual fees. You are right, but I just remember that
is very important because if you don't time things correctly, the closing process might look very repetitive and always the same. You cannot account for the variables, right? So that's why we have to make sure that once the contract is signed, then we can move forward to the next step. Because we've had experiences, where for some reason things don't fall through and the transactions falls apart, right?
And normally the people.
Yeah.
At the end, the big variable in a closing is the seller, the buyer, brokers, and attorneys. You know. I'm not gonna say anything bad. It's gonna be the other side. The good thing to be a lot of people is looking for the benefit of the seller and the buyers. So it's
Definitely.
only that little variables.
See, yeah.
You know.
The variables there are the things that determine how the process will go. So once we go into the permit, that's when we have to pay all the fees for the bank. Obviously, the money will depend on the bank that you choose. But the main three things that you need to pay for is the permit, is the annual fee in advance, the first one, and then the execution fee for the bank to sign the deed. Because remember, the bank is going to be party in your deed.
Yes.
So once your property gets into a trust, now whatever you do, if you want to sell the property or either by extinguish the trust or assigning or changing the beneficiaries, you have to instruct the bank through an instruction letter so the bank can sign that protocol at any point, right? So once that is done, usually it takes 20 days to get the permit of the Ministry of the Foreign Affairs. Nowadays, they are starting to pick up their pace because last year they were like a month, the least month and a half.
During COVID was crazy time for everybody, and that was could be month, 2 months, 3 months already. So that, but it was COVID times. You know, right now I already saw permit in 5 days. 5 working days. Yeah, they send it on Thursday to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Thursday. And
maybe Friday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and by Friday.
Yeah.
That's pretty quick turnaround.
Yeah, and looks like they're doing something good there. So we already have due diligence, promissory contract, trust, fideicomiso, and the first step?
And the first step is the public deed.
Perfect. What happened
now,
there?
in that stage, we already have pretty much the whole work done. So in this stage is where everything comes together to finalize the deed. We will have all the information that we already have poured into the public deed of all the sellers, if there's multiple of them, the information of the bank, the information of the buyer or buyers, and the information of the property and all the payment schedule. Everything is going to be poured into the public deed so we can have like a proper transaction. Obviously, everyone reviews that deed, buyer, seller, us as attorneys, the bank. Everyone has to agree on the wording and terms of such deed, and that's when we can plan for a closing date. Obviously, we wish and we want to use the one established since the contract. However, if down the road something happens, that's when we can make amendments to the contract because the variables that we don't know. However, the main goal is to get to this point on the date established in the contract. Let's say in this scenario, everything happens correctly and we're able to be ready even 1 week before, right? So that's when we speak to the parties and tell them if they wish to meet sooner or if we leave that closing date and that time as first schedule. And if everybody is or already have their tickets to come that day, we will leave it like that, right? It's just a matter of waiting for when that moment comes.
I think it should be mentioned that Maybe you can expect that the title is gonna be in another language, but no. At the end, everything of the titles, all the titles has to be in Spanish. Is something by law it required. Of course, we are happy to translate in that moment or tell you exactly what is the most important thing in that title, and we are showing you all that things, all that details, all that points, and the most important, I think, for you is that you see how much do you pay for the property. That go to another thing. Okay, in the title is the one that is, and nowadays the title is the one that show you as an owner of the property. However, you can see that, I don't know, 300,000 US in the title is gonna be in pesos with exchange rate. And then you need to get the CFDI. That is like an invoice that is gonna show how much do you pay, and that's for another episode. But we have to be sure that you're gonna get that document, because that document is very important for your taxes when you sell. But as I said, it's gonna be another episode that we're gonna talk about CFDI. But in the public deed,
the main bullet points are that everything reflects all the works that been done so far. Obviously, that's when you pay the notary fees, which are all the taxes of acquisition, and the seller pays their capital gains if there's any. Obviously, here the main point is to get a document that shows what you sign. At the very beginning, usually you are issued a simple copy of the deed, because in order for the notary to issue a certified copy, all the parties have to sign. And realistically, you would imagine that when the closing comes, all the parties are here: seller, trustee, and you. However, that's not the case. Usually when we have a developer, we have to make an appointment with the developer before or after, and then an appointment with the trustee bank to sign the deed. And when you come, that's when you sign, right? It's very rarely when we have seller and buyer together. However, the bank, it's always
the last one
to sign.
But normally it's buyer and seller together, but we are not gonna see never the bank. you know, it's really hard to have the bank there. I only knew about one time that the bank was in the closing, and it was because it was a famous person, and the person of the one that was in charge of that moment of the bank wants to meet that person.
Wanted to meet him, yeah.
But that's it, you know. But normally it's buyer and seller gonna sign, and then the bank. That's the reason of the simple copy.
Exactly.
As soon as the bank sign, the notary is gonna provide the certified copy.
Definitely.
So we have due diligence, promissory contract, trust, notary public, and what is the last step?
The last one is getting back to the public registry, but now to record the new title. So it will show after that moment, when somebody does their job at the public registry, now they'll see you as the owner. That's the last step.
But it takes long time to do that?
No, to put it in, it's fairly quickly. The thing is, once inside, the public registry has a lot of bureaucracy in it, and should be sitting in the public registry for 3 to 6 months.
But I think it's also because of the
working load, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of condominiums and properties in the area because we're very rapidly growing. So that translates into the working load of the public registry and municipal institutions, right? That's why they take so long. Because every single day, if you go to the public registry, you'll see lines of people working in the more than 100 notaries that are in the state. Every day with a box of deeds, putting them in. Now you see why they start piling up, right?
Yeah.
Once that is done, should be 3 to 6 months until it's out, and that's when the notary public issues the testimonio. That's what we call it here, and that is basically your original deed with all the payments, pre-closing documents, identifications, payment schedules, and all the documentation for all the parties and the property. It's in it. Very important 2 things to look for when you receive that is the registration ballot, which is the document that shows that it's properly registered, and the property tax payment.
The acquisition tax. Payment.
The acquisition taxes. Yeah, sorry. Those two will for sure show you that the property is properly registered and paid up to date with all the taxes.
Yeah, I just remember the last episode that we talked about the acquisition tax, in which you can see that the payment of the change of the owner, and then normally the municipality, they didn't do it. You have to go to that episode,
That
because
document.
we explain that, because you will have your title at the end of these 5 steps. You will have your title, boleta registro, the payment of the acquisition tax. You will have everything, and when you go to pay your property tax, your name is not on that paper, and you start to worry. No worries. Again, as we said in the last episode, you don't have to worry. It's just one more step. If
Contact
the
us.
municipality don't change the name, no worries, please. But for this episode, it was the closing process. We already covered the 5 steps.
5 steps.
That it was, again, due diligence, promissory contract, trust or fideicomiso, notary public, and normally the one that almost all the buyers forgot is the public registry. But we are here to complete that job and to give you your public deed duly recorded. So that's the 5 steps.
That's pretty much the whole process in a nutshell
Yeah.
for you to understand.
Amazing. I hope that you like the episode, and if you have questions, you can contact us at any time. Have an amazing day. Take care.
You too, guys.
Bye.